Hi, my name is EJ Massa. I was looking for a mod project to do, and I got in my head that I would do a composite mod on a Top Loader NES. The Top Loader NES was a revision of the NES that was more reliable, as the top-loading cartridge slot design didn't collect dust as easy or bend the pins out of place like the original model. It also lacks the 10 NES lockout chip, which was temperamental at best. The only problem is it has an RF output, which means you can't easily connect it to a modern TV or an upscaler easily. Now, I have an RGB modded NES with a multi-out harvested from a Super Nintendo, so I didn't need to do this mod. I just thought it'd be fun to do. So I started gathering materials from Retrofixes.com. They have a composite mod kit as well as replacements for the back panel, so you don't have to drill any more holes in the case. Which you could do if you wanted to drill some holes. And it just so happened, out of divine providence, our good friend Jason Graves, who's been on the podcast, he's edited some of our videos, and he's got an awesome YouTube channel of his own. Well, he just asked me out of the blue, hey, can you mod my NES with composite? And I was like, sure, send it to me and I'll do it for free because I can make some content out of that. A few days later, I get a package on my doorstep. Oh man, rock and roll. Opened up the package and there's a thank you card inside. EJ, you are the Mac Daddy. Thank you. I think you're thinking of John Hunt, but I'll take it. Oh nice, some Twizzlers, which I don't think I've had since I was a kid. You know what I'd do with Twizzlers? I would bite off the ends of them, and like there was that little cavity in the middle of the Twizzler, and I would use it as a straw in my soda. Oh shit, it still works. And here's the top loader. As you can see, there's only an RF output on the back. And finally, peppered beef jerky. Look, I won't say no to seasoned beef. I'd happily be paid in seasoned beef. Thank you very much, Jason. I will enjoy these. Before I start the mod in earnest, let me test the system to make sure it works. I'll test it with one of my favorite games, Mega Man 3. Yes, the very same cart my sister got for her birthday way back when, and somehow, now I have it. How'd that happen? Now, I haven't used one of these RF dongles in probably 20 years, so I'm curious to see what the quality of RF is after 2 decades of not using it. Screwed it into the CRT television and turned it on. Yeah, it works. You know, it doesn't look half bad. There's definitely some interference on it, but it has a bit of a natural, organic look to it. The image looks alive. This is how everyone played these games back in the day. And look, it doesn't look as good as an RGB modded console, but this is more authentic to my childhood experience, and I wouldn't be mad if this was the only way I could play the classics. But it's easier to upscale and capture with composite, so that's what we'll do today. Here's what I got from Retrofixes.com. Starting with this RCA composite port, I think it's very high quality with clearly labeled ports. I opted for the gold RCA jacks. I'm not sure if it really makes a difference in the end, but they look better. Gold. And here's the replacement power jack, which we'll have to replace because the stock one is embedded into the back panel. So we'll have to unsolder it and replace it. A lot of these companies will send you retro cards like this for some reason. Strange burst. You know, when I watch Jason Graves' content, I may experience a strange burst as well. And here's the little board that has all the components needed for the composite mod. Sure, you could buy all these components yourself, but this makes it super easy. Finally, it conveniently comes with some wires so you can hook this all up. Time to crack this baby open. First, I used one of those Nintendo security screwdrivers that you can buy from Amazon and removed the 4 screws on the underside. I wonder what Campbell is doing now. Campbell, if you're watching this, like, comment, and subscribe to Jason Graves. And now it's opened. Next, I went around the shielding and removed the screws with a standard Phillips screwdriver. There's 3 of them, and once removed, the shield pops off easily. There's 2 longer screws next to the cartridge slot, and after removing those, the board can be removed from the bottom case. Turn that board around to reveal the screws for the back shielding, which I removed. There's also a screw in the transistor that connects to the back shield, which also needs to be removed. And then I finally removed the screws connected to the back I/O plate. However, that won't remove the back plate because the power connector is soldered into the board and embedded into the panel. So this will be the most difficult part of the mod because I have to remove the RF box and power connector, which are soldered on with lots of old crusty solder. So to make this all flow easier, I heated up all the contacts with a soldering iron and added fresh solder. It may seem counterintuitive to add more solder to remove it, but it works. It gets everything flowing again. There's 3 contacts on the RF box that need this as well. In addition, there's 3 small pins on the bottom of the RF box, which will be the easiest to remove the solder from with my desoldering gun. The bigger ones will be more difficult because these are soldered to a big ground plate. I added flux with a flux pen to hopefully make this easier. Then I went around with the desoldering gun and did my best to remove as much solder as I could. That enabled me to lift the RF box a little, so I wedged a small screwdriver underneath the RF box while heating up the contacts with a soldering iron, and I was able to leverage the RF box off a little more, heated up the contacts on the other side, and the RF box slipped off. There we go. Look at this rusty piece of vintage tech. Finally, with the solder mostly off the power connector, I heated up the contacts and wiggled off the back plate gently. And look at that! Plenty of room for our new RCA connectors. I took the ribbon cable and peeled it into individual wires. However, I left one as a pair because that'll connect to our stereo audio. But other than that, I just peeled them into singles. Then I stripped the ends of the wire. I'll start by soldering the wires to the upgrade board by threading the wire into the vias. I heated them up, fed solder into it, and repeated that process until every via had a wire soldered into it, making sure none of the vias had any shorts between them. There we go. Now our little board is a beautiful little squid, ready to be installed into our system. Now I'll locate pin 21 on the PPU. I used a pair of wire cutters to very carefully snip the pin off the board. Now I believe that cutting this is optional, but you'll find more noise in the form of jail bars on the image. I hit the pin with a flux pen, fed some solder on it, then soldered the wire that connects to the via labeled 21 on the board. For power, we'll solder the wire connected to the via labeled 5 to the end of this resistor. Then, for stereo sound, I fluxed and applied solder to these 2 pins on the CPU chip, and I soldered 2 wires that go to the audio in vias. Now we'll install our replacement power connector. Slipped it into place, added flux to those contacts, fed in plenty of solder because these are big beefy contacts. I assembled the RCA jacks into the new back panel, sliding them into their respective holes. Made sure the ground tabs were bent to be accessible to my soldering iron. Looks good. So I soldered all the ground tabs together, using a small piece of wire to bridge this gap. I placed the shielding back on and made sure all the wires flowed out the top of the shielding. I think it's pretty cute this chip has a hole so you can just screw it right onto the shielding here. Made sure to fasten it tightly into place, and it looks really cozy there. Then I soldered the wire labeled C to the middle of the yellow RCA connector. Soldered all those tabs to the wire connected to the via labeled G. And soldered each audio wire to the center of the red and white RCA inputs. Finally, I reassembled the whole thing, making sure to put all the screws back in their proper place. And made sure that none of the posts in the case pinched any of my wires. And here's how it looks with a new back panel. And here's the comparison with the stock top loader on the left and the RCA modded one on the right. Looks excellent. But let's see if it actually works. I found some RCA cables, plugged them into the console, and connected the NES to my 20-inch Panasonic CRT. Let's test it with Mega Man 3 again. Flip the switch and boom, works perfectly. And it does look quite good. Definitely less noise than RF, and it plays great. Sure, not as crisp and clear as S-Video or RGB, but composite, I'd say, looks closer to how I remember playing these games. Now this mod should have stereo sound, so let me test this. Yep, one speaker has one set of sounds, and the other has the more bassy drum sounding sounds. Optionally, you could do this mod with mono sound if you don't want to have this sort of faux stereo effect. But now it's time to send it back to Jason, and since he sent me some jerky, I'll send him some local jerky from Whip City Jerky in Westfield. Can't wait to see what NES games Jason reviews with this system. What are some of my favorite Jason Graves videos, you ask? Let me tell you. Obviously, his Goodwill Games video is legendary. In this video, he goes to every Goodwill in the state of Florida to find video games. He has a series where he reviews every Super Nintendo RPG, and I think my favorite of that is Breath of Fire 2, because it provided me a great and unique perspective that I didn't consider on the story. I really enjoyed his Ultima NES video because Ultima was a game that I saw the name throughout my childhood, and I never knew what the games were like, and I also saw them in NES ROM lists and stuff like that, and for some reason, I really wasn't expecting them to be like this, and it was fun to go on that journey with him. He has a Sears video series, which is a must-watch, especially if you want some liminal horror of this zombie store. And finally, speaking of liminal horror, Namco Museum. I didn't realize how interesting those compilations were. It was great to see him go through them. Check out his videos, you won't regret it. Until next time, bye!